We've all experienced that knot of apprehension, haven't we? That subtle prickle on the back of your neck when starting something new, stepping into the unknown. Usually, it's just nerves. But sometimes it's a premonition, a quiet whisper of dread hinting at something far more sinister than typical first-day jitters. Tonight, I'm going to guide you through the experiences of ordinary people whose first days on the job unveiled horrors that defied explanation, events that clawed their way into the fabric of their reality and refused to let go. Like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or fears, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more unsettling tales that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. In today's episode, I'm sharing 3 true disturbing stories about first days on the job that turned into waking nightmares. You'll hear about a young park ranger who stumbled upon a ritualistic gathering deep in the woods, and a night watchman who discovered a chilling, hidden mechanism within a seemingly ordinary factory. So, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Now, let's get into it. First story. My name is Sarah, and I'd just landed my dream job as a park ranger in the Redwood National Park. I'd spent my entire life enamored with the quiet majesty of ancient forests, and the thought of spending my days amidst those towering giants filled me with a profound sense of peace. My first day started like any other, or so I thought. I was assigned to a section of the park so remote it barely had marked trails, an area known for its pristine, untouched wilderness. My task was simple: hike the perimeter, check for any unauthorized campsites, and report on the general health of the flora and fauna. I packed my gear: water, MREs, a compass, and a satellite phone, though I was told not to expect much signal out here, and set off, the crisp morning air filling my lungs. The towering redwoods quickly swallowed me whole, their immense canopies filtering the sunlight into ethereal shafts. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of unseen birds. It was everything I had imagined. I'd been hiking for about 4 hours, the GPS on my handheld unit flickering erratically when I noticed something out of place. It was a small, almost imperceptible detail at first: a thin, almost invisible strand of braided twine tied around the trunk of a particularly massive redwood. It wasn't natural, and it certainly wasn't park equipment. A few hundred yards further, I found another, then another, forming a subtle, almost imperceptible trail that veered off the faint game path I was following. Curiosity, the insidious serpent, coiled in my gut. I knew I should report it, but the ranger in me, the one trained to investigate anomalies, compelled me forward. The air grew still, the natural sounds of the forest seeming to recede. It was then I saw it, carved crudely into the bark of a fallen log, a symbol I didn't recognize. It looked like a distorted eye, surrounded by jagged lines that seemed to radiate outward. A chill that had nothing to do with the forest air traced its way up my spine. I decided to double back, to mark the coordinates and report it. But as I turned, a small dark bundle lay directly in my path. It hadn't been there a moment ago. My heart hammered against my ribs as I cautiously nudged it with my boot. It was my spare compass, the one I kept clipped to my backpack. It wasn't just lying there. It was carefully placed, and tied around it was another strand of that braided twine, identical to the ones I'd seen on the trees. A small, carefully folded piece of paper was tucked into the twine. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Scrawled, in what looked like charcoal, in crude, blocky letters, were 2 words: lost, found. The message was clear. I was being watched. My presence was known. The vastness of the forest, which had moments ago felt comforting, now felt oppressive. A silent witness to my unwitting intrusion. Despite the terrifying warning, something compelled me to follow the twine trail just a little further. I told myself it was professional duty, but a deeper, more primal, fear-driven curiosity was truly at play. The trail, barely visible, led me deeper into a particularly dense grove of ancient trees, where the canopy was so thick that the midday sun barely penetrated. It was eerily dark, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. I moved silently, my boots crunching softly on the mossy ground. Then, I heard it, a low rhythmic chanting, almost a hum, coming from deeper within the grove. My breath hitched in my throat. I crept forward, moving from tree to tree, until I reached a clearing. What I saw froze me to the bone. A circle of figures, cloaked in dark, rough-spun garments, stood around a shallow pit. In the center of the pit, a bound figure knelt, blindfolded. The chanting intensified, a guttural, ancient sound that seemed to vibrate in the very air around me. I couldn't make out faces, but their movements were slow, deliberate, and utterly horrifying. They were performing some kind of ritual. My foot slipped on a patch of wet moss, and a small twig snapped under my boot. The chanting stopped abruptly. Every head in the clearing turned in unison towards my hiding spot. I didn't wait. Adrenaline surged through me, overpowering the shock. I turned and ran, blindly crashing through the undergrowth, the tangled roots, and low-hanging branches clawing at my face and tearing at my clothes. I could hear them behind me, not running, but moving with a swift, uncanny grace, their rustling steps unnervingly close. The forest, my sanctuary, had become a labyrinth of terror. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed in protest, not daring to look back, not daring to stop. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but the primal fear of being hunted had fully consumed me. I just ran, praying for the faint hope of a signal, of an end to the suffocating isolation. I don't know how long I ran. Hours, maybe. I eventually stumbled out of the tree line onto a logging road, far from where I had parked, my body bruised and scratched, my uniform torn. I flagged down a passing logger, incoherent with terror, and managed to get a ride back to the ranger station. I reported everything, but without tangible evidence. My story was met with polite skepticism and concerned glances. They attributed it to disorientation, exhaustion, or perhaps a bit of overactive imagination on my first day. I transferred to a different park district a week later, requesting a placement far from any dense forests. I thought I was safe. A month later, a small, unmarked package arrived at my new apartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of dry, brittle leaves, was a single, perfectly braided strand of twine, identical to the ones I'd seen in the Redwood National Park, and impaled on it, a small, dark blue button, a button from my old park ranger uniform. The forest had not forgotten me. Second story, my name is Michael, and I recently took a job as a night watchman at an old textile factory on the outskirts of town. The place had been operational since the early 1900s, a sprawling brick behemoth full of rusted machinery and the lingering scent of old cotton and mildew. The hours were long, from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., and the pay was barely enough to cover my rent, but it was a job. My primary duties were simple: patrol the various floors, check that all doors and windows were secure, and log any irregularities. The factory was mostly automated these days, with a skeleton crew during the day shift, so nights were eerily quiet. My first shift began with a walkthrough from the day supervisor, a tired-looking man named Mr. Henderson who seemed more interested in getting home than explaining the intricacies of the factory. He pointed out the time clock, the emergency exits, and the circuit breaker room, emphasizing that I should never, under any circumstances, touch the main power conduits. "Just stick to the routine, son," he'd grumbled, "and you'll be fine." Around midnight, during my second round, I noticed something odd. In the oldest section of the factory, a cavernous space filled with dormant looms, there was a faint, almost imperceptible hum. It wasn't the usual creaks and groans of an old building settling. This was a rhythmic, mechanical vibration that seemed to emanate from beneath the concrete floor. I shone my flashlight around, but saw nothing out of place. The hum persisted, a low thrum that seemed to reverberate in my chest. A few minutes later, as I was passing the main power room, I saw it, a small, almost invisible crack in the concrete wall near the floor. It wasn't a structural crack. It looked more like a deliberate cut, precisely straight. My curiosity, a trait that had often gotten me into trouble, urged me closer. I knelt down, shining my light into the crevice. It was deeper than I expected, and within the darkness, I could just make out the glint of metal. The hum was louder now, a low throb that seemed to come from directly behind the wall. I pressed my ear against the cold concrete. The vibration was undeniable, and beneath it, a faint, almost inaudible clicking sound, like gears turning very slowly. I pulled out my old flip phone, but, as usual, there was no signal in this part of the factory. I was alone. A sudden chill swept through the room, even though the factory temperature remained constant. I felt a distinct shift in the air pressure, as if something massive had moved silently just beyond the wall. Then, a low guttural growl echoed from within the wall, a sound that was far too organic to be machinery. My blood ran cold. The growl was followed by a series of soft, scuttling noises, like something large and multi-legged dragging itself across a rough surface. This was not normal. This was not part of the factory, driven by a morbid fascination I couldn't explain. I found a loose piece of rebar on the floor and began to carefully pry at the crack in the wall. The concrete, surprisingly, gave way with a soft crumbling sound, revealing a narrow, dark opening. The hum intensified, and the metallic clicking became more distinct. I hesitated for only a second, my heart pounding in my ears, before shining my flashlight into the newfound passage. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a cramped, dirt-floored tunnel that sloped downwards. The air was heavy and stagnant, carrying a faint, sickly sweet odor. I could hear the strange mechanical hum much clearer now, emanating from deeper within the tunnel. And then I saw them, a series of crude, hand-drawn symbols scrawled in what looked like dried blood on the rough-hewn walls of the tunnel. They were spirals and interlocking triangles, symbols I had never seen before. This was not part of the factory's blueprint. I crawled into the tunnel, pulling the loose concrete back into place behind me, a foolish attempt at concealing my entry. The tunnel grew narrower and steeper, forcing me to hunch over. The air grew warmer, and the sickly sweet smell became more pronounced. The hum was now a throbbing resonance, almost painful to my ears, and the metallic clicking was louder, more erratic. Then, the tunnel opened into a small, circular chamber, lit by a faint, pulsating red light emanating from a strange contraption in the center of the room. It was a massive, intricate mechanism of brass gears and pistons, whirring and grinding with an unnerving, deliberate rhythm, and wrapped around parts of the machinery, almost integrated into it, were pulsating, dark tendrils that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. As I watched, mesmerized by the horrifying display, a low, rasping whisper echoed through the chamber, originating from the machinery itself. It spoke a name, my name. The metallic hum pulsed faster, and the tendrils on the machine twitched. I stumbled backward, hitting the tunnel wall with a sickening thud. The noise was deafening now, a cacophony of grinding metal and the rhythmic throbbing of the tendrils. The pulsating red light intensified, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the chamber walls. I scrabbled backward, desperate to escape the suffocating horror of that room. The whispers grew louder, urgent and demanding, and I could feel a strange, cold presence trying to worm its way into my mind. I clawed my way out of the tunnel, gasping for breath, the fear a bitter taste in my mouth. I ran, blindly, through the factory, past the silent looms and the empty offices until I burst out into the cool night air. I never looked back. I quit that job the next morning, leaving a frantic, half-coherent message on Mr. Henderson's voicemail about something in the walls. I later found out the factory was abruptly shut down, citing unforeseen structural issues. To this day, I occasionally hear a faint, low hum just at the edge of my hearing, and the metallic scent of old iron and something sweet fills the air around me. I know it's just my imagination, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder what that machine was, and why it knew my name. Third story. My name is David, and I just started my first day as a land surveyor for a small, independent company. Most of our work involved mapping remote tracts of land for potential development, often miles from the nearest paved road. I enjoyed the solitude of the job, the quiet precision of the measurements, and the satisfaction of translating untamed wilderness into neat lines on a blueprint. My first assignment was a particularly isolated parcel deep within the Appalachian foothills, a densely forested area known more for its forgotten logging trails than any modern infrastructure. My equipment was top of the line, a total station, a GPS unit, and a rugged all-terrain vehicle that could handle the treacherous terrain. The nearest town was a good hour's drive away, and my cell phone signal had died about 20 minutes after I turned off the main highway. It was just me, the towering trees, and the faint hum of my equipment. I'd been working for a few hours, meticulously setting up my total station, when I noticed something deeply out of place. Nestled between two ancient oak trees, almost completely swallowed by overgrown rhododendron bushes, was a small, perfectly square patch of ground. It was too neat, too precisely edged to be natural. The soil within this square was a rich, dark black, almost obsidian in color, starkly contrasting with the reddish-brown earth surrounding it. There were no plants growing within the square, not a single blade of grass or a fallen leaf. It looked sterile. I knelt, pushing aside the thick undergrowth, and ran my gloved hand over the soil. It was cool and oddly smooth, like fine ash. A faint, almost imperceptible metallic scent hung in the air directly above it, like ozone after a lightning strike. My GPS, usually reliable, started to glitch, its coordinates jumping wildly before settling on an impossible reading. Error. No satellites detected. A shiver traced its way down my spine. This wasn't just odd, it felt wrong. I tried to dismiss it as some forgotten logging camp fire pit, but the precision of the square, the barren earth, and that unsettling smell gnawed at me. I decided to pack up and report the anomaly. As I began to disassemble my equipment, I saw it, propped against the base of one of the oak trees, carefully placed as if for display, was my empty water bottle. I distinctly remembered placing it inside my vehicle's cab before I started working, and tied around its neck with a thin strand of what looked like human hair was a small, crudely fashioned doll, made of twigs and dried leaves. Its single eye, fashioned from a dark, polished stone, seemed to stare directly at me. A deep gut whisper too faint to form words seemed to drift from the very air around me, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. They knew I was here. They had been watching, fear-ward with a surveyor's instinct. I knew I should leave, but the doll, the perfect square, the whisper, I had to understand. I had to know what I'd stumbled upon. With a trembling hand, I picked up the doll and felt a sickening cold seep into my fingers. I followed the almost invisible trail of disturbed leaves that led away from the square. It wasn't a path, more like a faint impression in the undergrowth, barely perceptible. The metallic scent grew stronger with every step, and the air became heavy, oppressive, as if a storm was brewing. Though the sky was clear, deeper into the woods, the trees grew impossibly tall and close, forming a natural cathedral of shadows. Then, through a gap in the dense foliage, I saw it, a clearing, unlike any natural one. In its center, arranged in a precise circle around a fire pit from which no smoke rose, were dozens of the crude twig dolls, each with its single, staring stone eye, and standing among them, shrouded figures, utterly motionless, facing the fire pit. They weren't chanting or moving. They were just waiting for something or someone. A dry twig snapped under my boot. The sound, impossibly loud in the absolute stillness of the clearing, echoed like a gunshot. Every single shrouded figure in the clearing turned, slowly, in unison, their heads swiveling towards my hiding spot. I didn't see faces, only the deep, empty hoods of their cloaks, but I felt the weight of their gaze, a cold, predatory focus that stole the air from my lungs. I scrambled backward, tripping over roots and rocks, the twig doll still clutched in my hand. Panic, raw and unthinking, surged through me. I heard no footsteps, no shouts, but I could sense their advance, a silent, relentless pursuit. The metallic scent was overpowering now, filling my nostrils, and the oppressive weight in the air seemed to press down on me. I crashed through the undergrowth, tearing my clothes, my skin scraped raw by branches, the terrifying stillness of their pursuit far more terrifying than any chase. I ran until my lungs burned, until I collapsed, gasping, on the shoulder of the main highway, miles from where I had parked my vehicle. A passing motorist, seeing my disheveled state, stopped and gave me a ride back to town. I reported everything to the local sheriff, but without any physical evidence. My story was dismissed as a bad case of dehydration and disorientation. I quit my job the very next day, unable to stomach the thought of ever setting foot in the wilderness again. I moved to a city, trying to put the memory behind me. But a month later, a small, unmarked package arrived at my new apartment. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark, rich soil that smelled faintly of ozone, was a single, perfectly fashioned twig doll with its unblinking stone eye. And tucked beneath it, a small, precisely cut square of thin plastic, the exact size of my land surveying company ID badge. The threat was not over. It had only just begun. And that concludes our chilling journey into the unsettling first days on the job. If these stories have left a lingering chill, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to Dr. Bonechill for more tales that lurk in the shadows of our reality. Until next time, stay vigilant, for the things that go bump in the night often begin in the quiet light of day.